Don't die before I find you, Emily whispered into the snow. Something scratched beneath the flower cart. Once, then silence. Emily Carter stood behind the Red Pine Inn with a basket of split wood pressed against her hip. Dawn had not yet reached the forest, and the storm had covered the yard in a pale, unbroken sheet. Smoke drifted from the kitchen chimney. Frozen laundry snapped against the line. Somewhere inside, the innkeeper shouted for more firewood. The sound came again. 3 weak scrapes against wood. Emily set down the basket. Is someone there? No answer. She crossed the yard slowly, boots sinking through fresh snow. The old flower cart rested beside the storage shed, its wheels buried nearly to the spokes. A dark line disappeared beneath it. At first, Emily thought someone had spilled wine. Then she saw the paw print. Small, uneven, filled with blood. She lowered herself to her knees and looked beneath the cart. A wolf cub lay curled against the frozen axle. Its fur should have been silver gray, but snow, mud, and blood had darkened half its body. A severed chain clung to one hind leg. Each shallow breath moved its ribs no more than a finger's width. Oh, little one. The cub's eyes opened. Pale blue. Terrified. Emily reached toward it. The animal bared tiny teeth, but no growl came. Its head dropped before it could defend itself. I know, she murmured. I would not trust me either. She removed her wool shawl and spread it across the snow. Moving slowly, she slid both hands beneath the cub's body. It weighed almost nothing. Too little. The chain around its leg was silver. The metal had burned a raw circle through the fur. Someone had cut it recently. The broken edge was bright and sharp. Emily wrapped the cub in her shawl. That was when she noticed the collar. Dark leather. Fine stitching. Too expensive for a hunter's animal. The collar had been twisted inward, hiding a small metal crest against the cub's throat. Emily tried to turn it, but the animal jerked weakly. A blue-black stain marked its forehead. Not a bruise. Something beneath the skin. She leaned closer and smelled a faint bitterness beneath the blood. Silverthorn. Her mother had once called it winter death. It slowed the heart until even experienced healers mistook sleep for death. Emily pressed 2 fingers beneath the cub's jaw. A pulse answered. Barely. From the forest came the low call of a hunting horn. The cub convulsed in her arms. A second horn answered farther east. Then a third. Not hunters signaling a trail. Men surrounding prey. Emily looked toward the inn. She could call for help, but the Red Pine housed travelers, guards, merchants, and strangers whose names she never learned. Whoever had chained this cub might already be inside. The kitchen door opened. Emily, the innkeeper shouted. Where is that wood? She pulled the shawl tighter. Coming. A branch snapped beyond the yard. Heavy boots moved through the trees. Emily lifted the cub and hurried toward the coal shed, keeping her body between it and the forest. Before closing the door, she looked once more at the bloody tracks. They did not begin beneath the cart. They came from the road, and beside them were human footprints, deep and deliberate, stopping only a few steps from where she now stood. Lock every door, the stranger ordered, and no one leaves until I find my son. The command reached the Red Pine Inn before the man who gave it crossed the threshold. Conversation vanished. A spoon struck the floor near the hearth. Cards remained suspended above a gambler's table. Even the innkeeper, who had shouted through knife fights and winter riots, stood with both hands frozen around a clay pitcher. Then Alpha King Mason Blackwood entered. Snow covered the black fur across his shoulders. He was taller than every guard behind him, broad and heavily built beneath dark leather armor marked by mud, broken branches, and dried blood. His face was sharply masculine, handsome without softness, and a pale scar cut through one dark eyebrow. In his right hand, he carried a long hunting spear. Its steel point was wet. Emily stood beside the kitchen doorway with an empty firewood basket pressed against her apron. She lowered her eyes, not enough to lose sight of the men entering behind him. Royal guards spread through the room and barred the windows. 2 moved toward the rear doors. Another took position beside the stairs. A man in a charcoal cloak followed Mason inside. He did not carry a visible weapon. He did not need one. People stepped aside before he reached them. Beta Grant Holloway, the innkeeper, breathed. Grant removed his gloves finger by finger. He was older than Mason, with carefully combed brown hair and the calm expression of a man arriving at a meeting rather than a desperate search. The prince was taken before midnight, Grant announced. The kidnappers entered this region less than an hour ago. Anyone sheltering them will be treated as an enemy of the crown. Emily's fingers tightened around the basket handle. Behind the inn, inside the coal shed, the silver-gray cub lay wrapped in her shawl beneath 2 empty grain sacks. Its breathing had grown weaker. Mason planted the spear against the floor. The impact shook ash from the hearth. "My son is 7 years old," he said. "He may be injured. He may not appear human." Several guests glanced uneasily toward the windows. Emily did not move. A missing prince. A dying wolf cub wearing a hidden royal crest. The truth struck with such force that she nearly looked toward the rear yard. Grant noticed. His gaze settled on her. "You," he said. Emily raised her eyes. "Have you seen anything unusual?" The cub's blood still marked the cuff beneath her sleeve. She folded her hands over it. "Only tracks near the flower cart, my lord." "What kind of tracks?" "Wolf." The room seemed to contract around the word. Mason turned toward her fully. "Large." No, something changed in his face. Hope entered too quickly to become visible, then disappeared beneath control. "Take me there." Grant stepped between them. "Your Majesty, the kidnappers may be using the animal as bait. We should search the rooms first." Mason's jaw tightened. "You heard her. And I am asking you not to walk into an obvious trap." Emily watched Grant lift one hand toward the king's arm. His cloak shifted. A short length of silver chain hung from his belt beneath the fabric. One broken end was bright and freshly cut. The links matched the chain burned around the cub's leg. Emily forgot to breathe. Grant followed her gaze downward, then covered the chain with his cloak. For one silent moment, they understood each other. She knew he had been near the cub, and he knew she had recognized the evidence. Grant smiled. "Search the coal shed first," he ordered. The cub was hidden inside it. Mason reached for his spear. Emily stepped forward before fear could stop her. "There is nothing in the coal shed." Grant's smile deepened. "Then you will not mind proving it." The coal shed door opened on an empty floor. Grant stood in the entrance while 2 royal guards searched behind the woodpile, overturned the ash buckets, and drove their sword tips beneath the stacked grain sacks. Nothing moved. Emily remained beside Mason in the snowy yard, forcing her breathing to stay even. Minutes earlier, while the men crossed the inn, she had slipped through the kitchen passage and moved the cub into the narrow space beneath the flower room stairs. Servants used it to store broken stools. No guard would search there unless someone told them exactly where to look. Grant turned toward her. "You were correct." His voice contained no relief, only calculation. Mason studied Emily's face. "You said there were tracks. They ended beside the cart, Your Majesty. And the wolf?" "Gone." Grant brushed snow from one glove. "Then the kidnappers have already moved it." He ordered the guards toward the stables. Emily lowered her eyes before he could see the anger in them. The chain at Grant's belt had disappeared, but she had seen it. That was enough. As the search spread through the yard, Emily returned to the flower room carrying a bucket and a rag. No one questioned a maid cleaning muddy footprints while a king hunted for his missing child. She closed the door behind her. The cub lay where she had left him. His eyes were shut now. Emily knelt and touched his side. Still breathing. Barely. She unwrapped the shawl and examined the leather collar. 3 details waited beneath it. The first was a puncture no wider than a sewing needle. It sat behind the cub's left ear, hidden where thick, fur-met leather. No thorn had made such a clean wound. Someone had held him still and pushed metal into his skin. The second detail was the smell. Silverthorn carried the bitter scent of cold iron, but another odor clung to the wound. Beeswax mixed with pine resin. Saddle wax. Royal riders used it to waterproof tack during winter patrols. Emily touched the collar's fastening. The third detail was the knot. 3 loops crossed over one another, pulled flat beneath the buckle. Her mother had once shown her that knot after treating a patrol wolf injured near the northern road. Only royal guards were taught to tie it. It held even when leather became wet with blood. This was not the work of forest rebels. Someone from Mason's own company had poisoned the cub. A faint sound passed through the wall. 3 notes. A man whistling in the yard. The cub's body reacted before Emily did. His legs drew inward. His claws scraped the floorboards. A broken whimper escaped his throat as he tried to push himself farther beneath the stairs. Emily covered him with her body. "It's all right." The whistle came again. 3 slow notes. The cub began trembling so violently that his teeth clicked. Emily looked through a crack in the flower room shutter. Grant stood beside the stable door. He appeared to be watching the guards search the hayloft, but his lips were shaped around the final note. Mason approached him from across the yard. The cub smelled him before he saw him. His head lifted weakly toward the shutter. For 1 second, hope replaced terror in his pale blue eyes. Then Grant whistled again. The cub collapsed. Emily pressed 2 fingers beneath his jaw. The pulse had slowed. Too much. She turned the collar over and found a thin ridge hidden inside the leather seam. Something hard rested beneath it. Another piece of metal. Before she could open the stitching, footsteps stopped outside the flower room. Grant's voice came through the door. "Emily Carter." The handle began to turn. "You have something that belongs to the king. Open the door," Grant said, "or I will have it broken." Emily slid the cub deeper beneath the stairs and covered him with a torn flour sack. His breathing had become so faint that the cloth barely moved. She stood, wiped her hands on her apron, and opened the door. Grant entered alone. That frightened her more than guards would have. He closed the door behind him and looked around the flower room. Shelves of meal sacks lined one wall. A cracked table stood beneath the shutter. White dust floated through the cold air. "You lied to your king," he said. "I told him the coal shed was empty. You told him there was nothing there." "There wasn't." Grant smiled. "You choose words carefully for a maid." Emily kept herself between him and the stairs. His gaze moved over her shoulder. From the yard came the sound of boots, horses, and Mason's controlled voice ordering another search. Grant stepped closer. "Give me the animal." "What animal?" His expression remained calm, but one hand settled beneath his cloak. "Do you know what happens to servants who interfere with royal matters?" "No, they disappear beneath them." A claw scraped softly against wood. Grant heard it. He pushed past Emily. She seized a metal scoop from the flour barrel and struck the shelf beside him. A sack split open, pouring white powder across his face and coat. Grant staggered back, coughing. Emily dropped to her knees and pulled the cub into her arms. The door opened. The innkeeper stood there with Dr. Walter Hayes and 2 royal guards. Grant wiped flour from his eyes. "She concealed it," he said. The cub hung limp against Emily's chest. The innkeeper's face hardened. "You brought a sick wolf into my food stores." "He is not sick." Dr. Hayes stepped forward and touched the cub's neck for less than a heartbeat. "No pulse." "There is one," Emily said. "It is slowed by silverthorn." The healer examined the blue-black mark on the cub's forehead. His expression changed. Only briefly. Then he withdrew his hand. "Blood plague." The guard stepped back. Emily stared at him. "There are no lesions. The disease begins beneath the skin. There is a needle wound behind his ear." Dr. Hayes did not look. Grant removed the collar before Emily could stop him. The hidden crest disappeared inside his fist. "The creature must be burned," the healer said. Immediately, Emily tightened her hold. "He is alive." A tavern maid does not question a royal healer. The innkeeper grabbed Emily's arm. "Let it go before you bring death into my house." She twisted away. The cub's head rolled against her shoulder. Grant signaled the guards. They took him from her. Emily fought until one man pinned both her wrists behind her back. Outside, servants carried wood into the center of the yard. Oil darkened the stacked branches. Snow melted around the first torch. Mason was nowhere in sight. Grant had sent him toward the stables with another false report. The cub was laid upon a folded cloth above the wood. Emily saw his chest rise once. Then stop. "No." The guard tightened his grip. Grant raised the torch. "Burn it before the king sees it." The flame touched the oil. Fire climbed the wood in a sudden orange line. Emily drove her heel down on the guard's foot, tore one hand free, and threw a bucket of hot ash across the ground. Men stumbled back, coughing and shielding their eyes. She ran. The heat struck her face as she reached the pyre. She pulled the cub from the cloth and held him against her chest. His body was cold, too still. Behind her, a hunting spear cut through the smoky air. Mason had entered the yard. He saw Emily holding his son beside the flames, and he lowered the spear toward her heart. The spear point stopped one breath from Emily's chest. "Put him down," Mason said. Smoke moved between them. The fire behind Emily snapped through the oil-soaked wood. Guards surrounded the yard, but no one stepped closer. Grant stood near the pyre with ash across his coat, one hand still holding the royal collar he had taken from the cub. Emily looked at Mason. His face had gone still in the way powerful men became still before violence. Snow melted against his dark hair. Both hands gripped the spear shaft. His gray eyes were fixed on the small body in her arms. "He is alive," she said. Mason's jaw tightened. "You are holding my son beside a burning pyre. He was placed there. Put him down." "No." The word left her before fear could stop it. A murmur passed through the guards. Grant stepped forward. "Your Majesty." She concealed the animal and attacked royal men. Dr. Hayes confirmed blood plague. Emily did not look at him. The cub's body remained cold against her chest. His head rested beneath her chin. No breath stirred the fur around his muzzle. But silverthorn did not kill all at once. It made life quiet. Quiet enough for frightened men to mistake it for death. Emily lowered herself to her knees. Mason followed the movement with the spear. "Do not touch him again," he warned. She shifted the cub across her lap. "I need to know whether his heart has stopped. You have already done enough." Grant's voice sharpened. "Take her." Two guards moved. Mason raised one hand. They stopped. Emily bent over the cub. She remembered her mother kneeling beside injured animals in winter, pressing her cheek near their mouths when fingers could no longer find a pulse. Do not listen for life where everyone expects it to be. Find the place death has not reached yet. Emily placed one hand beneath the cub's neck. Then she kissed his forehead. The blue-black mark felt cold against her lips. For one terrible second, there was nothing. No warmth. No movement. No answer. Her eyes burned. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "You should not have been alone." Something touched her lower lip. Not breath. A faint tremor beneath the skin. Emily froze. There. A tiny beat. Then another. Weak and uneven, but real. She pressed her lips to his forehead again, feeling carefully. The cub's heart was still fighting. Emily lifted her head. Dropped the spear. Mason stared at her. "What?" "The sound may stop his heart." Behind her, the pyre cracked loudly. The cub flinched. Barely. But Mason saw it. His grip changed. Emily drew the cub closer, shielding his ears from the fire and the shouting men. "He can still hear you," she said. "He is trapped inside his body, and every sudden noise is frightening him." Mason's gaze moved to the cub's front paw. One tiny claw had caught in Emily's apron. The paw tightened. A breath escaped the cub's muzzle, so soft it might have been lost beneath the wind. Mason heard it. The spear slipped from his hands. Steel struck stone. The sound silenced the entire yard. Mason took one step forward, then stopped as though approaching too quickly might break what remained of his son. "Liam," he said. The cub's ear twitched. Something in Mason's face cracked. Not completely. Only enough for Emily to see the father beneath the king. Grant moved toward them. "This proves nothing. Reflexes can continue after." Mason turned. "Another word, and I will forget how long you have served me." Grant stopped. Emily looked down at the collar clenched in his fist. "Your son was poisoned," she said. "There is a needle hidden inside that collar." Mason followed her gaze. Grant closed his hand around the leather. Too late. The king had seen. Emily pressed two fingers beneath Liam's jaw. The pulse weakened again. "We do not have much time." Mason knelt in the snow across from her. For the first time, the Alpha King lowered himself before a tavern maid. "Tell me what you need." Emily held his son between them. 7 minutes, she said. "And everyone in this yard must obey me." "For the next 7 minutes." Mason said. "Her word is law." No one moved. Emily looked around the yard. Warm water. Not boiling. A kitchen maid ran toward the inn. Clean linen. Charcoal ground into powder. Ember root from the spice shelf. And a knife heated over flame. Dr. Hayes stepped forward. "This is madness." Mason did not look at him. "You heard her." The healer stopped. Emily lowered Liam onto Mason's discarded cloak. The thick black fur protected the cub from the snow, but she kept one hand beneath his neck so his head would not fall backward. His pulse weakened beneath her fingers. 6 minutes. Grant still held the collar. Emily extended her hand. "Give it to me." Grant's expression remained composed. "You intend to treat a royal heir with kitchen herbs?" "I intend to remove the poison you placed near his heart." Several guards turned toward him. Grant laughed softly. A frightened maid sees treason in every shadow. Emily did not argue. She pointed at his fist. "The collar." Mason rose. He did not raise his voice. "Give it to her." Grant's fingers tightened once before he released the leather. Emily caught it and immediately felt the hard ridge inside the seam. She took the heated knife from a servant, wiped the blade clean, then cut through the stitching. A thin silver needle slid into her palm. Black residue coated its point. The yard went silent. Dr. Hayes bent closer. Silverthorn. Emily looked at him. You knew? His face lost color. I suspected. You ordered the body burned. Grant interrupted. The poison could have come from the kidnappers. Emily held up the collar. The needle was sewn inside after the leather was fastened. Whoever did this wanted it pressed deeper every time he moved. Mason stared at Grant. Not accusation yet. Something colder. Save my son, he said. Emily crushed the charcoal into the warm water and added a small piece of ember root. The mixture turned dark and bitter. She dipped one corner of the linen into it. Hold his mouth open. Mason knelt opposite her. His large hands hovered over Liam without touching him. Emily saw the hesitation, the fear of causing more harm. She guided his fingers gently. Here, support the jaw. Mason obeyed. Emily pressed a few drops beneath Liam's tongue. His body jerked. Grant stepped forward. She is killing him. Mason turned his head. One more step, and you lose it. Grant stopped. 5 minutes. Emily placed warm linen around Liam's chest, careful not to heat him too quickly. Silverthorn slowed the heart by forcing the body into false winter. Too much warmth could shock it into stopping completely. Speak to him, she told Mason. The king looked at her. He can hear you. Mason lowered his face toward the cub. Liam. No response. You are not alone. The cub's ear moved. Emily gave him another drop. For minutes, the blue-black stain on Liam's forehead began to fade at the edges. His breathing did not return. Emily pressed 2 fingers beneath his ribs. The heartbeat was there. Faint. Irregular. Again, she said. Mason's voice roughened. I am here, son. Liam's paw twitched against the cloak. Then his body arched. A broken gasp tore from his throat. Mason reached for him. Do not lift him. Emily rolled the cub onto his side. Dark fluid spilled from his mouth onto the snow. He coughed. Once. Twice. Then air entered his lungs. A full breath. The sound was small. It changed the yard. Mason bowed his head, one hand closing over the fur at his son's shoulder. Emily kept counting the breaths. Too fast. Then slower. Stronger. Liam opened his pale blue eyes. He did not look at the king first. He looked at Emily. His claws caught weakly in her sleeve. Grant's face changed. Only for a moment. But Mason saw it. Relief had filled every face in the yard except his. Emily lifted the open collar. There may be more than one needle. She felt along the inner seam. A second hard shape pressed beneath the leather. Before she could cut it free, flames rose from the stable roof. A guard shouted. Then another guard drew his sword. Not toward the fire. Toward the king. The guard's sword turned toward Mason before anyone understood the fire was a signal. Emily did. The stable roof burned too quickly. Oil had been poured across the shingles. Behind you, she shouted. Mason twisted as the false guard struck. Steel scraped across the king's shoulder plate instead of his throat. Mason caught the man's wrist, drove one elbow into his chest, and tore the sword from his hand. 3 more guards drew their weapons. Not against the attacker. Against Mason. Grant stepped backward through the confusion. Protect the prince, he called. But his men moved to separate Liam from his father. Emily lifted the cub against her chest. The second needle remained hidden inside the collar, pressing poison deeper every time Liam moved. His breathing had returned, but each breath shuddered against her palm. The inn's rear doors slammed shut. A wooden bar dropped across them from inside. They had been locked in the yard. Grant's plan had changed. He no longer needed Liam to appear dead. He needed every witness dead with him. Mason blocked another strike with the stolen sword. Firelight moved across his black armor as he drove the attacker into the snow. Take Liam to the kitchen passage, he ordered. The passage is blocked, Emily said. Smoke rolled from the stable roof toward the yard. The horses screamed behind locked doors. Emily looked toward the coal shed, then the kitchen chimney. Ash was carried from the ovens through a narrow stone chute beneath the flour room. Servants used it to empty soot beyond the outer wall. Too small for Mason. Large enough for Emily and the cub. She ran. Grant saw her. Stop the maid. A guard crossed her path. Emily threw the bowl of charcoal water into his face. He staggered, blinded, and she slipped beneath his arm. Liam gave a weak cry as she reached the kitchen door. The bar would not lift. She kicked the lower panel until the old would split, then crawled through the opening with the cub held close. Behind her, steel struck steel. Mason was fighting to keep Grant's men away from the door. Emily entered the flower room and pulled open the iron ash grate beneath the ovens. Heat breathed from the narrow tunnel. Liam's body trembled. "I know," she whispered. "Just a little farther." She crawled into darkness. The stone passage scraped her shoulders. Smoke followed, thickening with every breath. Liam's claws caught weakly in her sleeve. Halfway through, his body went limp. Emily stopped. "No." She pressed her fingers beneath his ribs. The heartbeat had slowed again. The second needle. She laid him across her lap in the cramped tunnel and tore open the collar seam with the edge of the first needle. A smaller silver barb dropped into her palm. Black poison shone along its tip. Liam did not breathe. Emily pulled the barb free, pressed her mouth near his muzzle, and gave one careful breath. Nothing. Another. The cub coughed. Air entered his lungs in a thin, broken gasp. Behind them, someone crawled into the tunnel. A whistle sounded. 3 slow notes. Liam began shaking. Grant's voice came through the smoke. "You cannot hide him forever." Emily gathered the cub and continued forward. The tunnel opened into a snow-covered drainage ditch beyond the inn wall. She climbed out, coughing, and laid Liam beneath a pine tree. Mason was not with her. The yard behind the wall roared with flames and fighting. Then the kitchen roof collapsed. Emily looked toward the fire. A dark figure appeared through the broken rear door. Grant. He carried Mason's spear. 2 of his guards dragged the Alpha King behind him in silver chains. Grant smiled when he saw Emily. "Put the cub down," he said, "or his father dies first." Grant rested the spear point against Mason's throat. Snow hissed against the burning roof behind him. 2 guards held the Alpha King upright with silver chains wrapped around his arms and chest. Blood darkened one side of Mason's armor, but his gray eyes remained fixed on Emily, not on the spear, on Liam. "Put the cub down," Grant repeated. Emily held Liam closer. His breathing was shallow but steady now. The second needle lay hidden inside her closed fist, its blackened tip warm from the cub's blood. "You need him alive," she said. Grant smiled. "I needed him dead when his death could weaken the king. Now I need him alive long enough to prove you poisoned him." One guard dragged a leather pouch from beneath his cloak and threw it into the snow beside Emily. The pouch struck her boot. Its contents spilled across the ground. Silverthorn leaves. A small glass vial. Royal coins. Evidence prepared before anyone had found the cub. Grant raised his voice so the surviving guests and guards gathering near the ruined inn could hear. This maid concealed the prince, carried the poison, and tried to escape when discovered. Dr. Hayes emerged through the smoke. He looked at the vial, then at Grant. Fear crossed his face. Grant noticed. "Tell them what you found." The healer swallowed. The cub showed signs of silverthorn poisoning. And who possessed silverthorn? Hayes looked toward Emily. The answer had already been chosen for him. Mason pulled once against the chains. The spear pressed closer to his skin. "Do not," Grant warned. Emily lowered Liam gently onto her shawl. Grant's men shifted toward her. She opened her hand. The second needle caught the firelight. "Before you arrest me," she said, "ask him why the poison was sewn inside the royal collar." Grant's smile thinned. "A collar you controlled." "No. A collar tied before Liam reached the inn." She lifted the severed leather strap. "The knot has 3 crossing loops beneath the buckle. Royal riders use it because it cannot loosen in rain or blood." One of Mason's loyal guards stared at the fastening. "That is the Beta Guard knot." Grant's eyes hardened. Emily continued. "The needle was coated with saddle wax, beeswax, pine resin, and lampblack." She held it beneath the guard's nose. "The same wax used on Grant Holloway's winter tack." Grant struck the spear shaft against Mason's shoulder. "Enough," Liam whimpered. A whistle hung from Grant's belt. 3 carved holes. Emily pointed toward it. When he whistled in the yard, Liam stopped breathing. Grant covered the whistle with one hand. Too late. Mason had seen it. Emily looked at Dr. Hayes. "You examined Liam before the pyre. You saw the puncture." The healer's face collapsed. "Grant told me the prince was already dead. He ordered you to say blood plague." Hayes closed his eyes. "Yes." The word changed the crowd. Grant moved the spear from Mason's throat and aimed it toward Emily. "You think a knot and a frightened healer will save you?" Liam raised his head. His pale eyes found Grant. The cub growled. Weakly. but with recognition. Then the child shifted. Silver fur withdrew beneath skin. Small limbs lengthened. A 7-year-old boy lay trembling beneath Emily's shawl. Mason stopped breathing. Emily wrapped the cloth around Liam's shoulders. The boy looked at Grant's whistle. He used that, Liam whispered. Grant's face emptied. He told me father would stop looking. Every loyal guard turned toward the Beta. Grant drove the spear toward Liam. Emily seized the rope hanging from the inn's flower hoist and pulled with both hands. Above the yard, 3 heavy sacks dropped from the loading frame. They struck Grant and the nearest guard, knocking them into the snow. Mason twisted hard. The weakened chain slipped across the edge of his shoulder armor and broke. He caught the falling spear before it touched the ground. Grant tried to rise. The spear point stopped beneath his jaw. Mason's voice was quiet. You buried my son beneath poison and expected his silence to protect you. Grant looked past him toward Emily. Hatred replaced calculation. Mason followed his gaze. No, the king said. She is the reason you failed. The spear remained beneath Grant's jaw until every loyal guard had chosen a side. One by one, swords turned toward the Beta. The surviving guests gathered near the ruined inn, faces lit by fire and falling snow. Dr. Hayes stood with his hands raised. Grant's men had lost their weapons beneath the flour sacks or dropped them when Liam spoke. Mason did not look away from the man who had betrayed him. Behind him, Captain Reed, the senior guard still loyal to the crown, stepped forward with iron chains. Grant laughed. You think this ends with me? Mason lowered the spear just enough for the guards to seize him. It ends with you answering for every hand that helped you. Grant fought then, not like a courtier, like a cornered animal. He drove one shoulder into Captain Reed, tore free of the first chain, and reached for Liam. Emily moved before the guards did. She pulled the boy behind her and seized the broken flower hoist rope. One hard jerk released the remaining wooden beam above the loading frame. It crashed into the snow between Grant and Liam. Grant stumbled. Mason crossed the distance in 2 strides. He struck Grant once with the spear shaft. The Beta fell to his knees. This time, the chains closed around both wrists. Liam clung to the back of Emily's dress. His small fingers trembled against the fabric. Mason saw them. The anger in his face changed. He handed the spear to Captain Reed and approached slowly, as though Liam were still the frightened cub beneath the flower cart. My son. Liam looked at him. For a moment, neither moved. Then Mason knelt in the snow. The Alpha King lowered himself until he was no taller than the child. Liam left Emily's side and ran into his father's arms. Mason caught him against his chest. His eyes closed. Only once. Only long enough for the king to disappear and the father to remain. I looked everywhere, Mason whispered. Liam buried his face against the black armor. I knew you would. Emily turned away, giving them the privacy no one else in the yard understood how to offer. Grant was dragged past her. He stopped. You were nothing this morning, he said. Emily looked at him. And you still saw me as less dangerous than a sword. Grant's mouth tightened. That was your mistake, she said. By sunrise, every surviving conspirator had been arrested. Dr. Hayes confessed that Grant had ordered him to declare Liam dead and threatened his family if he refused. The silverthorn, the saddle wax, the hidden needles, the whistle, and the prepared evidence were placed before Mason. Grant's plan had depended on silence. Emily had preserved every object that could speak. 3 days later, the Moonridge pack assembled in the stone courtyard of Blackwood Keep. Emily stood near the lowest step of the royal platform, wearing the same cream linen dress she had worn at the inn. The sleeve had been repaired where Liam's claws had torn it. Nobles filled the galleries. Royal healers stood beneath the eastern arch. Servants remained near the walls, exactly where people of their station had always been placed. Mason entered with Liam beside him. The boy wore a dark blue tunic and carried no crown. When he saw Emily, he released his father's hand and crossed the courtyard to stand beside her. Whispers moved through the pack. Mason faced them. The woman before you did not know she was holding my heir. The courtyard quieted. She did not know saving him would earn protection, rank, or reward. She saw something small, wounded, and alone, and chose not to leave him there. Emily felt every eye turn toward her. Mason continued. When healers dismissed him, she listened. When soldiers threatened her, she stood. When my own spear was pointed at her heart, she protected my son before defending herself. He descended the steps. In both hands, He carried the spear that had fallen in the snow. Mason stopped before Emily. Then he placed the weapon on the ground between them. I raised this against you before I understood the truth. Emily looked at the steel point. Mason's voice lowered, but the courtyard heard every word. I will never raise it against you again. He turned toward the royal healers. Emily Carter will train with you under crown protection. Then toward the pack. She will serve as royal keeper of the young, with authority over every healer, guard, and servant responsible for this kingdom's children. A noble near the gallery shifted uneasily. Mason's gaze found him. Anyone who mistakes kindness for weakness may remember what became of the last man who did. No one objected. Liam took Emily's hand. Mason offered his own, not as a command, not as a king summoning a servant. He waited. Emily looked at the spear on the stones, at the child holding tightly to her fingers, and at the man who had learned to lower himself before asking her to stand beside him. Then she placed her hand in Mason's. His fingers closed around hers carefully. The pack bowed. Emily did not. Mason had not asked her to. And as Liam stood between them beneath the winter sun, the Alpha King left his spear lying on the ground. The first child disappeared from Blackwood Keep 6 nights after Emily received her new title. His name was Noah Reed. He was 8 years old, the son of a kitchen servant, and too frightened of the dark to leave the lower dormitory alone. Yet his bed was empty before dawn. The window remained locked. The door had not opened. Emily stood beside the narrow mattress while guards searched the servant's wing. A wool blanket lay folded near the pillow. One small shoe remained beneath the bed. The other had been placed in the center of the floor. Inside it rested a silverthorn leaf. Not fresh, pressed flat, waiting to be found. Liam stood near the doorway in his nightclothes, one hand wrapped around Mason's fingers. His face had lost color. That was in Grant's pouch, he whispered. Emily crouched beside the shoe. No, the edges are different. Mason looked down at her. What do you see? This leaf was dried months ago. She lifted it by the stem, and someone painted the black veins onto it. Captain Reed frowned. Why use a false poison? To make us look in the wrong direction. A sound moved through the wall behind the bed. 3 slow scratches. Everyone froze. Emily pressed her palm to the stone. The sound came again. Not an animal. Fingernails. Mason pulled the bed away from the wall. Behind it, one stone sat deeper than the others. Emily found a thin line along its edge and pushed. The panel opened into darkness. Cold air touched her face. A passage ran between the walls. Too narrow for a grown warrior. Wide enough for a child. Liam stepped closer. Noah used to bring bread to the nursery. Emily looked at him. When? At night. Before Grant took me. Mason's grip tightened around his son's hand. Emily entered the passage first. The stone scraped her shoulders. Behind her, Captain Reed followed with a lantern while Mason remained with Liam at the entrance. The tunnel descended beneath the servant's wing and ended at a small wooden chamber. Noah sat inside, alive, bound to a chair with strips of white linen. His eyes widened when Emily reached him. She covered his mouth before he could cry out. Who brought you here? Noah shook violently. A woman. What did she look like? She wore a healer's veil. Emily cut the linen from his wrists. Did she hurt you? No, he pointed toward the table. She said I had to give you that. A small wooden box rested beneath the lantern. Mason entered the chamber as Emily opened it. Inside lay one object. The royal spearhead. The same steel point Mason had ordered removed after laying the weapon before Emily. A line had been carved into the metal. You saved the wrong child. Liam read the words over Emily's shoulder. His breathing changed. Mason moved instantly, kneeling in front of him. No one is taking you again. Liam looked at Noah. She did not mean me. Emily turned toward the hidden chamber. 4 sleeping pallets lined the far wall. Each was child-sized. 3 were empty. One still held a folded blanket. This place had not been built for Noah alone. Someone had been using the castle walls to move children long before Grant's betrayal. Captain Reed raised the lantern. A symbol had been painted above the final pallet. A black wolf carrying a silver crown in its jaws. Mason recognized it. His expression hardened. That crest belonged to my mother's guard. Emily looked at him. Your mother died 20 years ago. So did everyone who served her. Noah began to cry. Emily knelt beside him. What did the woman tell you? The boy stared at Mason. She said the Alpha King remembers the son he lost. His eyes moved to Liam. But he has forgotten the daughter they buried. The lantern flame bent sharply. Air entered from another passage. Footsteps retreated beyond the wall. Emily seized the light and ran toward the sound, but the corridor ended at a sealed iron door. From the other side, a woman began humming. Liam collapsed against Mason. "I know that song," he whispered. Emily turned. "From where?" His eyes filled with fear. "She sang it while Grant held me." The humming stopped. Then a woman's voice passed through the iron. "Tell Mason his sister is coming home." The woman behind the iron door knew Mason's childhood name. "Little Wolf," she called softly. "Do you still sleep with one hand beneath the pillow?" Mason went still. No guard moved. Emily watched his face change by a fraction. The question had reached somewhere deeper than memory. Only family would know that. Or someone who had stood close enough to watch a frightened boy pretend he was not afraid. "Open the door," Mason ordered. Captain Reed examined the lock. "There is no keyhole on this side." The humming began again. Liam covered his ears. Emily knelt beside him. "What does the song mean?" He shook his head. "She sang it whenever Grant left the room." "Did she speak to him?" "Once." Liam's fingers tightened around Mason's sleeve. "She told him not to damage my face." The words entered the chamber like ice. Mason placed himself between Liam and the iron door. "What did Grant call her?" Liam closed his eyes, trying to remember. "My lady." The woman laughed softly beyond the wall. Then the sound of metal dragged across stone. Emily raised the lantern. A black liquid began leaking beneath the door. "Not blood. Lamp oil." "Back," she said. Captain Reed reached for Noah. Emily looked upward. The chamber's ceiling was wooden. The woman did not intend to open the door. She intended to burn the room. A spark struck on the other side. Flame appeared beneath the iron. Mason lifted Liam into his arms. "Find another exit." Emily searched the walls. For child-sized pallets. One hidden passage behind them. One ventilation shaft above the lantern. Too narrow for Mason. Wide enough for the boys. She tore the blankets from the beds and wrapped them around Liam and Noah. "Captain, lift them." Reed raised Noah toward the shaft. The boy crawled inside. Liam followed, looking back at his father. "You are coming?" Mason glanced at the flames spreading across the floor. "Yes." It was a promise made before he knew how to keep it. Emily searched lower. Smoke gathered near the ceiling. The hidden chamber had been built for children, but every old nursery passage needed an adult service entrance. Her fingers found scratches beneath the final pallet. Not claw marks. Boot marks. She dragged the bed frame aside. An iron ring lay embedded in the floor. Mason seized it and pulled. A square hatch opened onto a steep stone stair. Fresh air rose from below. "Move," he said. Captain Reed entered first. Emily followed. Mason came last, closing the hatch as fire reached the blankets. The stairs descended into an abandoned nursery beneath the keep. Dust covered carved wooden wolves and broken cradles. Faded blue ribbons hung from the walls. At the center stood a portrait. A young Mason, no older than 10, stood beside a dark-haired girl holding a silver wolf toy. The girl's face had been cut from the canvas. Beneath the frame rested a small stone marker. Elena Blackwood, beloved daughter, lost 2 winter. Emily touched the dust near its base. One section had been disturbed recently. She pushed the marker aside. Inside the hollow space lay a woman's white healer veil, Grant's personal seal, and a child's burial bracelet. The bracelet had never been worn. Mason picked it up. "My father told me she died from fever." Emily examined the clasp. No child was buried with this. Captain Reed looked toward the dark corridor beyond the nursery. "Then where has she been for 20 years? Footsteps answered him. Slow. Unhurried. A woman appeared beneath the far arch wearing black armor beneath a white healer's cloak. Dark hair fell over one shoulder. A silver scar crossed her throat. She had Mason's gray eyes, but none of his restraint. "Elena," he said. She looked at Liam first, then at Mason. "You kept the throne," she replied. Her hand settled on the sword at her side. "And they gave my life to protect it." Elena drew her sword without looking at Mason. The blade was narrow, dark, and marked near the hilt with the same black wolf crest painted above the children's pallets. Captain Reed stepped forward. Mason raised one hand. "No," Reed stopped. Elena's gaze moved to the boy in Mason's arms. Liam stared back at her. "You helped Grant take me," he whispered. Something flickered across Elena's face. "Grant took you before I reached the carriage. You sang to me. To keep you awake. You told him not to hurt my face. I told him not to touch you at all. The answer came too quickly to be invented. Emily watched Elena's sword hand. Her grip was firm, but the blade remained angled toward the floor. A woman prepared to kill did not leave her throat open or stand within striking distance of four enemies. Elena wanted them afraid. Not dead. Not yet. Mason lowered Liam carefully. What did our father do to you? Elena laughed once. There was no amusement in it. He buried me. The nursery seemed to shrink around the words. When Mother's guards discovered the council intended to replace you, they hid me beneath the keep. Father feared 2 heirs would divide the packs, so he announced that winter fever had taken me. Mason looked at the false grave marker. You were 6. I was useful at 6. Her eyes hardened. And dangerous at 7. Emily noticed the scar across Elena's throat. Not a battle wound. Too straight. Too deliberate. They tried to silence you, she said. Elena looked at her for the first time. You must be the maid. Emily Carter. The woman who convinced my brother kindness can survive inside a crown. Mason stepped between them. Do not threaten her. I have not. You burned the hidden chamber. To force you down here before the council found us. Captain Reed frowned. The council? Elena reached inside her healer's cloak. Reed drew his sword. She removed a folded ledger and threw it across the nursery floor. It opened at Mason's boots. Names filled every page. Royal healers. Noble houses. Guard captains. At the top of the final column was Grant Holloway. Beneath him were 12 council seals. Grant did not create the conspiracy, Elena said. He inherited it. Mason crouched and turned the pages. Emily saw records of children moved between keeps, false deaths, altered bloodlines, and payments made in Silverthorn. This began before Liam was born, she said. It began before Mason was crowned. Elena's gaze settled on her brother. They kept me alive because my blood could be used against you. When father died, they trained me to become the sister who would one day return and divide your pack. Then why return now? Because Grant failed. Mason's jaw tightened. You worked with him. I let him believe I did. Liam stepped closer to Emily. He was afraid of her. Elena looked at the boy. He should have been. A bell rang above them. One low toll. Elena's expression changed. Not surprise. Alarm. She seized the lantern and extinguished it beneath her cloak. Darkness swallowed the nursery. A second bell sounded. Closer. Emily heard stone turning somewhere behind the walls. What does it mean? Mason asked. They found the ledger, Elena whispered. You brought it here. I brought you to it. The third bell struck. Iron dropped across the corridor behind Elena. Another gate fell at the stairway. They were sealed inside. Captain Reed raised the lantern again. A thin gray mist flowed from carved wolves along the walls. Liam coughed. Emily smelled the bitterness immediately. Silverthorn. Ground into vapor. She covered Liam's mouth with her sleeve. Stay low. Mason lifted his son. Elena tore strips from her white veil and handed them to the others. Wet these. With what? Reed asked. Emily looked toward the broken cradles. Old nursery rooms always had water channels to clean the floors. She kicked aside a wooden wolf and found a narrow stone basin beneath it. Still damp. She soaked the cloths and pressed one over Liam's nose. The mist thickened. Elena moved toward the false grave marker. There is one exit. Mason followed. You said father buried you here. He also built the way out. Elena pushed the burial bracelet into a narrow opening beneath the inscription. Stone shifted. A passage opened behind the marker. Captain Reed entered first. Emily guided Liam through, but Elena remained beside the mechanism. The door must be held until everyone crosses. Mason stopped. So you stay behind? Elena looked at him. You kept the throne. Her voice softened for the first time. Let me keep one promise. Mason seized her wrist. No more graves. The fourth bell began above them. The mist reached Elena's shoulders. Emily pressed both hands against the stone release beside her. It needs 2 people. Mason understood. He lifted Liam toward Reed. Then he took his place beside his sister. Emily held the mechanism with them. 3 hands. 3 survivors of the same conspiracy. The passage widened. They stepped through together as the nursery disappeared behind a wall of silverthorn. On the other side, torches ignited one by one. 12 council members stood waiting. At their center was Dr. Hayes. He wore Grant's black wolf crest over his healer's robes. And in his hand was the vial Emily had believed destroyed at the inn. Thank you, Elena, he said. You finally brought us every Blackwood heir. Dr. Hayes held the silverthorn vial above Liam's head. The 12 council members formed a circle beneath the old keep, each wearing the Black Wolf crest over formal robes. None looked surprised to see Mason alive. They had expected him. They had expected Elena. They had expected every Blackwood heir to walk into the chamber together. Only Emily had not been part of the design. Hayes noticed her last. The maid, he said, always standing where history does not require her. Emily kept one hand over Liam's damp cloth. History required someone to notice what you were doing. A councilman near the eastern wall drew a short blade. Captain Reed moved in front of Liam. 3 guards appeared behind the council. Not royal guards. Men wearing old armor marked with the Queen's crest. Elena's people. Hayes smiled. You trained them well. Elena raised her sword. I trained them to survive you. Mason looked around the chamber. Stone pillars. For torch brackets. A drainage channel running beneath the floor. And above them, a bronze bell no larger than a clenched fist. Emily saw the thin wire descending from it to the vial in Hayes's hand. Not a signal. A release. If the bell moved, the vial would shatter. Silverthorn vapor would fill the chamber. Hayes followed her gaze. Do you hear this room too? Emily did not answer. The wire passed behind the western pillar, beneath a councilman's boot, then into the wall beside Elena. Someone else controlled the bell. Liam, Emily whispered. Do you remember the song? The boy looked at her. Yes. When I say now, sing it. Mason's eyes shifted toward Emily. Trust moved between them without words. Hayes raised the vial. You saved the prince because Grant lacked discipline. You saved Elena because she wanted forgiveness. But none of you understands what this kingdom needs. A frightened council hiding beneath children's rooms. Mason asked. A single bloodline weakens every pack. Hayes looked at Elena. 1 heir can be controlled. 2 can be divided. 3 create war. Emily heard the wire tighten. The councilman near the western pillar moved his heel. Now, sing. Liam began the lullaby Elena had used during his captivity. 3 soft notes. The old guards reacted instantly. Not to Liam. To the melody. Their heads turned toward the bell. Elena understood. It was never a nursery song. No, Emily said. It was a command. Elena repeated the final 3 notes. 2 of the old guards seized the western councilman before he could pull the hidden wire. Captain Reed struck the bell mechanism with his sword, severing the line. Hayes threw the vial. Mason moved. He caught Hayes's wrist before the glass left his hand. The healer drove a knife toward Mason's ribs. Elena blocked it. For 1 heartbeat, brother and sister stood shoulder to shoulder. Then Emily saw the second vial inside Hayes's sleeve. She grabbed the wet linen from Liam's face and wrapped it around Hayes's hand. The glass broke inside the cloth. Silverthorn darkened the fabric but released no vapor. Hayes stared at her. You are not royal. No, Emily twisted the cloth tighter around his wrist. That is why you never planned for me. Mason struck the healer to the ground. Across the chamber, the Queen's guards turned on the council. Some surrendered. Others fought. Steel rang beneath the keep until the Black Wolf crests lay scattered across the stones. Hayes remained on his knees. Elena placed her sword beneath his chin. You buried children to preserve order. He smiled weakly. We preserved the kingdom. Mason looked at Liam. Then at Emily. No, he said. You preserved your power. By sunrise, the 12 council seats stood empty. Their ledgers were carried into the great hall and read before nobles, guards, healers, servants, and every family whose child had been declared dead without a body. Mason did not hide Elena's survival. He did not claim she had returned to challenge him. He named her publicly as his sister and a victim of the council that had controlled both their lives. Then he called Emily forward. She stood between Liam and Elena beneath the royal banners. The crown failed because it listened only to those born close enough to speak, Mason said. He placed no weapon in Emily's hands. He gave her a key. From this day, no child disappears behind a sealed door, no healer acts without oversight, and no servant is punished for bringing warning to the throne. Liam took her left hand. Elena took the right. Mason stood before her, not above her. The kingdom heard kings, he said. You taught it to hear everyone else. Outside, the morning bell began to ring. Emily listened. One clear note. Honest. For the first time, no hidden hand pulled the rope.